It all started with a casual dinner invitation, nothing extravagant, just a small gathering at our favorite Italian place. Kate, my girlfriend, had invited a few of her friends, one of whom happened to be Jordan, the just a pal she'd been telling me about for months. He was one of those guys who always seemed to be hanging around, but whenever I asked Kate about him, she assured me that he was nothing more than a friend, platonic, harmless. The first time I met him, I immediately felt a weird vibe. Call it intuition, or maybe just the jealousy that comes with being in a committed relationship, but I wasn't buying it. There was something about the way Jordan looked at Kate, the way he smiled a little too wide, lingered just a second too long. But I trusted Kate and I trusted her judgment. I thought I could handle it. So, when we all met up for dinner, I tried to keep my mind open. I smiled and shook Jordan's hand, hoping to get along with him, trying to ignore the nagging feeling that crept up whenever he was around. It was clear that he was charismatic, charming even, with a way of talking that made people feel like they were the only one in the room. I had to give him that much. Kate was glowing that night, talking and laughing with her friends, and I was genuinely happy to see her so comfortable. The food was great, the wine was flowing, and for the most part, I tried to push my lingering doubts aside. But as the evening wore on, something started to shift. It was subtle at first, but then it became undeniable. Jordan had a way of getting too close, his hand brushed against Kate's more than once, his laugh a little too loud whenever they shared a private joke. It wasn't until dessert arrived that the real tension started to build. The restaurant was nearly empty by then. It was one of those quiet, intimate places where the only sounds are the clinking of glasses and the soft hum of a distant conversation. We'd been talking for hours, but by the time dessert was served, it felt like the mood had shifted in the room. The energy had become thick with something unsaid, something simmering beneath the surface. Jordan, of course, seemed oblivious to the growing tension, leaning in with a smirk as Kate picked up her fork to dig into the tiramisu. "You're always so sweet, Kate," he said, his voice carrying a flirtatious undertone that I could no longer ignore. Kate, bless her, laughed it off, but there was an unease in her smile that I hadn't seen before. I shifted in my seat, my eyes narrowing at the interaction. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I told myself I was overreacting. There was no reason for me to jump to conclusions. Jordan was a friend, after all, and friends joke, right? But even as I told myself this, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was crossing a line. It wasn't until the moment I'd never forget that I realized just how deep this friendship ran. As I reached for my glass of wine, distracted by a conversation with one of the other friends, I looked back up to find Jordan leaning in far too close to Kate, his face inches from hers. And that's when it happened. Jordan kissed her. A simple, fleeting kiss, maybe, but a kiss nonetheless. A kiss that, in a second, shattered everything I thought I knew about their relationship. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. It was so sudden, so unexpected, and I was paralyzed with disbelief. Kate, looking slightly dazed, pulled back with an awkward chuckle. But my mind was already racing. What the hell was going on? How could she just let that happen? She had been laughing and talking with him just seconds before. I could feel the heat in my face, the flush of embarrassment, the sting of betrayal. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The restaurant, though quiet, suddenly felt suffocating. I could feel the weight of Jordan's gaze on me, the tension hanging in the air. But I wasn't about to let him off the hook. Not this time. The table was silent, everyone now aware of the tension that had shifted from playful to uncomfortable. Kate, now visibly flustered, looked over at me. "Mark," she began, her voice small, uncertain. But I wasn't about to let her take the fall for this. It wasn't about her in that moment, it was about Jordan. He was the one who crossed the line, and I needed him to know that. I wasn't going to play the nice guy. Not when he'd done this right in front of me. With a controlled calm that I didn't even recognize in myself, I looked at Jordan, my voice cold but steady. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I asked, my gaze locking onto his. He blinked, caught off guard, his smirk faltering for a split second. Hey, man, it's just a joke. No harm, no foul, right? I didn't let him finish. No harm? You kissed my girlfriend, in front of me, and you think that's funny? My voice had a bite to it now, and I could see the others at the table stiffen, clearly unsure of how to react. But I didn't care. Not anymore. Jordan held up his hands in mock surrender, his eyes darting to Kate before returning to me. Relax, man. It was just a peck. Nothing to get worked up about. The nerve of this guy. I could feel the rage building inside me, the unfairness of the situation fueling my anger. I wasn't about to let him talk his way out of it. You don't get to do that, Jordan. You don't get to disrespect me like that, and you sure as hell don't get to disrespect Kate. Kate's face flushed as she opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand to stop her. I wasn't angry with her. Not yet. This wasn't her fault. She hadn't invited this. But I wasn't going to stand there, silently accepting it. If Jordan thought he could push me around, think again. I was done playing nice. I stood up abruptly, the scrape of my chair against the floor cutting through the tension. We're leaving, I said, the finality in my tone making it clear that I wasn't asking. Kate looked up at me, unsure of what to do, but I didn't give her a choice. I wasn't going to let this slide. Not now, not ever. The others at the table stared at us, their eyes wide, but I didn't care. I walked straight to the door, feeling the weight of the situation on my shoulders. I could feel Jordan's eyes on me, but he didn't follow. Not yet, anyway. As I reached for the door, I glanced over my shoulder at Kate. Come on, let's go. She stood up hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark, wait. I didn't. I know, I said, cutting her off. But we're leaving. Now. The drive home was painfully quiet. Kate sat in the passenger seat, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze focused out the window. I could tell she was still processing everything that had happened, everything we had just experienced. As much as I wanted to say something, to break the silence, I knew that nothing I could say right now would ease the tension between us. She needed space. The last thing I wanted to do was accuse her of something she wasn't guilty of, especially after everything that had just gone down. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't just angry at Jordan. I was furious with myself for allowing the situation to escalate so far before stepping in. I should have seen it earlier. I should have recognized the subtle signs, the flirtation that went unnoticed while I'd been busy telling myself I was just being paranoid. I'd let my guard down. And in that moment, Jordan had capitalized on it. I turned my eyes to the road, focusing on the dark stretch of highway ahead. The lights of passing cars flickered in the distance, but they couldn't brighten the mood in the car. Not when everything felt so off. Kate's voice finally broke the silence. Mark, I'm so sorry. I didn't let her finish. Don't apologize, Kate. It's not your fault. She turned to look at me, her face full of confusion. Then why are you so upset? This isn't you. You're not usually like this. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to keep my voice steady. It's not just about you, Kate. It's about respect. He disrespected me, and he disrespected you. I could feel the anger bubbling beneath my words. And I let it happen. I should have stepped in sooner. I should have never let that guy get so close to you. I should have seen what he was doing. Kate let out a long sigh, looking at me with a mix of guilt and frustration. Mark, don't say that. You don't need to blame yourself. You were right. He crossed the line. I'm just so mad at myself for letting it happen. I thought he was just joking, being friendly. I didn't realize how far it had gone until it was too late. I glanced over at her briefly, my heart heavy with the weight of the situation. It wasn't your fault, Kate. I don't blame you. But that guy, I let out a short, frustrated laugh. He's been making moves for a while now, hasn't he? Kate shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes downcast. She was quiet for a moment before speaking. Yeah, I guess. But I didn't think anything of it. I thought he was just messing around. It wasn't serious, at least, that's what I kept telling myself. I could tell she was torn between defending herself and confronting the reality of what had just happened. The kiss, however innocent or fleeting it might have seemed to Jordan, was more than just a casual gesture. It was a violation of trust, of boundaries that I thought were clear. I couldn't imagine how Kate must have felt in that moment, sitting there frozen while Jordan crossed a line that no one should have crossed. Why didn't you say something, Kate? I asked, my voice quieter this time. You don't have to just stand there and let someone do that to you. You could have told him to stop. You should have told me. Kate's face flushed, and her hands wrung nervously in her lap. I don't know, Mark. I guess I was in shock. And then, I thought maybe I was overreacting. I didn't want to make things awkward between everyone. I didn't want to ruin the night. She turned toward me, her eyes searching mine. I should have said something. I should have stood up for you. I'm sorry. I never meant for you to feel this way. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I knew Kate was not the type to put herself first when it came to situations like this, but I also knew that she didn't deserve to feel like she had to appease anyone, least of all someone like Jordan. In that moment, I realized that this wasn't about just one kiss, it was about something much deeper. Kate had let herself get pushed into a situation where she felt she couldn't act on her own instincts because of the pressure to keep things calm, to keep the peace. And I had failed to see that. I pulled into our driveway, the engine rumbling softly as I parked. The headlights illuminated our front porch, but it felt like 1,000 miles away. I killed the engine and turned to Kate, who was still staring at her lap, her fingers still nervously twisting around each other. I should have been there, I said softly, the weight of it all settling over me. I shouldn't have let him do that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for not seeing it sooner, Kate. Her eyes met mine then, and she gave a small, sad smile. I'm sorry, too. I should have told him to back off long before tonight. But I never thought it would get this far. I shook my head, my voice firming. You don't have to apologize. What matters now is what we do about it. Jordan thinks he can walk in and disrespect me like that, like it's no big deal. But it is. And I'm going to make sure he knows it. Kate's brow furrowed. What do you mean? I could see the uncertainty in her eyes, the concern over what I was implying. But I wasn't going to let this slide. Not with Jordan, and not with anyone who thought they could undermine our relationship. He needed to know that his actions had consequences, and I wasn't going to let him think he could get away with something like that. I'm not just going to let him walk away from this, I said, my tone growing more resolute. I'm going to confront him. I'm going to make sure he knows that this isn't just a mistake. It's a betrayal of trust. And I'm not going to let him think he can play games with us. Kate's eyes widened. Mark, you don't have to do that. You don't need to prove anything to him. But I could see the spark in her eyes, too, the same one I was feeling. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't just about defending our relationship. It was about putting a stop to his behavior once and for all. No more second chances. No more ambiguity. No, Kate, I said firmly. I'm doing this. For both of us. I won't let him disrespect you or me again. Kate's gaze softened, her lips parting as she let out a deep breath. Just, be careful, okay? I don't want this to escalate further. I nodded, understanding the concern in her voice. But I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. Trust me, I said, a determined edge creeping into my voice. This ends tonight. The next day felt like an eternity. I couldn't stop replaying last night in my mind, each moment of tension, each word spoken, each look exchanged. Kate and I had talked, but the air between us still felt thick, charged with the unspoken, and I knew I had to follow through with what I had said. I couldn't let Jordan get away with what he'd done, and there was no way I was going to let him think that his kiss was anything but a violation. I spent the entire day thinking about how I would handle it. I couldn't just let this slide, it wasn't in my nature, and honestly, I didn't want it to become a constant source of stress in our relationship. There was no going back now. I knew I had to do this, and I had to do it in a way that made it clear to Jordan that I wasn't messing around. I hadn't heard from Jordan since the night of the barbecue, and part of me was relieved. I wasn't sure what kind of apology or excuse he'd try to come up with, but I was prepared to shut it down the second he opened his mouth. The longer he stayed silent, the more I knew he was avoiding the situation, probably trying to figure out how to talk his way out of it. But I wasn't giving him that luxury. Kate, on the other hand, seemed conflicted. She knew something needed to be done, but she hated confrontation. She hated drama, and I could see that she was still trying to process everything that had happened. But as much as she wanted to avoid the situation, I could tell she was also relieved that I wasn't letting it slide. "I just don't want things to get ugly, Mark," Kate had said that morning, her voice filled with concern. "I don't want you to do something you'll regret." I understood where she was coming from. She didn't want things to escalate, but at the same time, I could tell she wasn't okay with what Jordan had done either. She needed reassurance that I wasn't going to lose control, that I wasn't going to take things too far. "You know I'm not going to do something stupid, Kate," I said, my tone softening. "But I need to handle this. I need to make sure Jordan knows exactly what he's done. He can't just walk away from this and pretend it didn't happen." I could see the hesitation in her eyes, but she eventually nodded, giving me a small smile. "I just want it to be over. I don't want any more tension between us." It wasn't just about tension between us, though. It was about setting boundaries, about making sure that everyone in my life knew that I wasn't going to let anyone disrespect my relationship, not even for a second. I sent Jordan a text that afternoon. Simple. Direct. "We need to talk. Meet me at the bar tonight. 8 p.m. I didn't give him the chance to back out, to make excuses. I wasn't asking for an apology. I was demanding respect. And I wasn't going to let him talk his way out of this. I had a feeling that he would show up. Men like him always think they can charm their way out of trouble. But I was done with the games. I spent the rest of the day trying to focus on anything else. I worked through some emails, made a couple of calls, but in the back of my mind, the clock was ticking. I had a plan, and I was ready to execute it. There was no more room for uncertainty. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of the bar, my pulse was already racing. The bar was low-key, one of those dimly lit places with wooden floors and a well-worn atmosphere. It was the kind of place where you could get lost in your thoughts or drown your sorrows with a good drink. I chose it because I knew Jordan wouldn't suspect anything. I needed him to think this was just a casual conversation. But there was nothing casual about what I was about to do. I walked inside, scanning the room. It was quiet, just a few people scattered at tables, and the bartender wiping down the counter. I didn't see Jordan yet, but I wasn't worried. He would show up. He always did when he thought he had the upper hand. 5 minutes later, he walked in. Jordan was dressed casually, but his usual smirk was already in place. He looked around the bar and caught my eye immediately. His expression flickered for a second, but he quickly recovered and walked toward me. "Hey, man," he said, sitting down across from me, his voice smooth. "What's up? You said you wanted to talk. What's this about?" I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms, studying him. There was something almost comical about how completely unaware he seemed of the situation. He had no idea what was coming, and that made it even more satisfying. But I wasn't here to waste time. "Cut the crap, Jordan," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I'm not here to play games with you. You kissed my girlfriend the other night. Right in front of me." His face flickered with a momentary look of confusion, followed by an attempt to brush it off. "Oh, come on, man. It wasn't like that. You know I didn't mean anything by it. We were just having a little fun." The anger simmered beneath my skin, but I kept my tone measured. "Fun? You kissed her, Jordan. You crossed a line. And you think I'm just going to let that slide?" He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I could see the wheels turning in his head as he tried to figure out how to spin his way out of it. "Look, man, it was just a peck. It wasn't anything serious. I didn't mean to make things weird between us. You don't get it, do you?" I cut him off, my voice low but dangerous. "It's not about the kiss. It's about the lack of respect. It's about the fact that you think you can just step into my life, flirt with my girlfriend, and everything will be fine because it's just a joke. That's not how this works." Jordan's smirk faltered as he realized I wasn't going to let him off the hook. Okay, I get it. I'm sorry. I didn't think it was a big deal. I didn't mean to make you feel like that." I scoffed, shaking my head. "Don't give me that apology. You didn't accidentally kiss her. You knew exactly what you were doing. And I don't need your apology. What I need is for you to stay the hell out of my relationship." For a moment, Jordan sat there, silent, his face tense. Then he spoke, his voice much less confident than before. "Fine. Whatever. I'll back off. You've got her. I'll stay out of it. You don't have to make such a big deal out of it." But it was already too late. He had made his move, and I wasn't going to let him act like nothing happened. "You've already crossed that line," I said quietly, leaning forward. "And you'll never get the chance to do it again. If you even think about getting close to Kate after this, I won't hesitate to step in. Understand?" Jordan stared at me for a moment, his jaw clenched, but there was no fight left in him. He didn't say anything else. He just stood up, muttered something under his breath, and walked out of the bar without another word. I sat there for a long while, my thoughts swirling. The adrenaline was still pumping through my veins, but there was a sense of relief too. Jordan had left, and I had finally taken control of the situation. He knew where I stood now. And Kate, she would know that I would always have her back, no matter what. I paid my tab, left a tip for the bartender, and walked out into the cool night air. I was done. But this wasn't just about defending my relationship. It was about sending a message. No one, not even just a pal, was going to come between me and Kate again. I wasn't sure what I expected after the confrontation with Jordan, but as I made my way home, I couldn't shake the sense that things weren't entirely over. Sure, he'd walked out of the bar, head down, but that didn't mean I was done dealing with the mess he'd created. I could already picture him making excuses, talking to Kate behind my back, trying to smooth things over. That wasn't something I was going to tolerate. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Kate sitting on the porch, her figure outlined by the soft light from the house. She was waiting for me, but there was something in her posture, her stiff shoulders and the way she was holding her phone, that told me she already knew something had happened. I couldn't help but feel a knot tighten in my stomach as I walked toward her. She didn't wait for me to speak. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. Her eyes searched mine for answers, the same mix of worry and hope in her gaze. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "It's done. He's backing off, Kate. I made sure of it." She stood up, her hands trembling slightly as she placed the phone in her pocket. "And he didn't say anything else?" "No," I replied. "I laid it all out. He knows where I stand now. He won't be making any more moves on you." Kate's lips parted, her brow furrowing. I don't know what to say. I'm glad you confronted him, but I still feel like this whole thing is just, I don't know, a mess. I could tell that she wasn't just referring to Jordan. She was talking about us, too. About the strain this whole thing had put on our relationship. I couldn't blame her for feeling that way. Things had changed, and while I was proud of how I handled it, I knew that it didn't magically fix everything. It wasn't just about putting Jordan in his place, it was about rebuilding the trust we had and making sure this didn't linger between us like a shadow. I walked up to her and gently placed my hands on her shoulders, offering her a comforting smile. I get it. I know this hasn't been easy for you. I know it's been hard to deal with someone like him showing up in your life, but I promise you, I'm not going to let him or anyone else come between us. Kate looked at me, her eyes softening. I never wanted it to be like this, Mark. I never wanted you to feel like you had to fight for me. I shook my head. You don't have to worry about that. I'm not fighting for you, Kate. I'm protecting what's ours. And I'll always do that. She nodded, though I could see the weight of the situation still hanging in the air. It was one thing to talk about it, but living with the consequences was a different story. I could sense that there was more Kate wanted to say, but she wasn't ready. Neither was I, to be honest. There were still so many unanswered questions, things I wanted to work through before we could both move past this and come out stronger. We went inside, and I poured us both a drink. The silence wasn't as heavy as it had been earlier in the day, but it was still there. Kate sat down on the couch, her legs tucked underneath her, while I sank into the chair across from her, nursing my drink. We didn't speak for a while, both of us caught up in our own thoughts. I wasn't sure if Kate was processing everything or if she was just too tired to talk. Finally, she broke the silence. Do you think he'll ever try again? I could see the doubt in her eyes. The fear that Jordan might come back into our lives, causing even more problems. As much as I wanted to tell her that everything would be fine and that she never had to worry again, I knew better than that. Jordan was unpredictable, and his ego was bruised. It was hard to tell if he would stay away for good or if he'd try something sneaky in the future. I wasn't about to give him that chance, though. I won't let him, I said firmly. And if he does, I'll handle it again. We're not letting him back in, Kate. Not in any way. She smiled softly, but it wasn't the same smile I'd seen before. It was tentative, still searching for reassurance. You really mean that, don't you? I do, I said. This is about us. It always has been. And nothing and no one is going to change that. Kate nodded, her eyes locking with mine, and for the first time since all this had started, I saw a glimmer of peace in them. We might not have all the answers yet, but I was determined to make sure we found them together. The next few days were full of questions. Kate and I spent a lot of time talking about how to move forward, how to rebuild the trust we'd lost. She had her own doubts, her own fears about how this would affect our relationship, and I didn't blame her. What Jordan did wasn't just a one-time thing, it had the potential to change everything if we let it. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I knew it would take time, but I was willing to put in the work. I wasn't just going to sit back and hope things would go back to normal. I had to show Kate, over and over again, that I was committed to her, that I had her back, and that I wasn't going anywhere. I also kept my distance from Jordan. I didn't hear from him after the confrontation, and I wasn't about to initiate contact. I knew he was probably sulking, maybe even plotting his next move, but I didn't care. He had made his choice when he tried to pull that stunt at the barbecue, and now he was out of the picture for good. As the days went by, things between Kate and I started to settle. The tension eased, but I knew the road ahead wouldn't be without bumps. This wasn't something that could be swept under the rug. But the more we talked, the more I realized that the real work wasn't just about pushing Jordan away, it was about showing Kate that I was there for her, that I was on her side, and that I wasn't going anywhere. We were in this together. And I would make sure she knew that, no matter what. It had been a few weeks since the confrontation with Jordan, and things between Kate and me were starting to find their rhythm again. There was still a slight undercurrent of tension every time we talked about what happened, but overall, I could feel things beginning to heal. We were slowly but surely working through everything, piece by piece, and I was starting to think that maybe this whole ordeal wouldn't tear us apart. However, I wasn't about to let my guard down. I knew how these things worked, how one tiny slip, one unresolved issue, could undo all the progress you'd made. And I wasn't going to let that happen. There was a part of me, though, that kept waiting for something else. For Jordan to make another move, for him to show up out of the blue, for him to try and slink his way back into Kate's life. I'd seen the way he operated before, how he could charm his way into people's lives and manipulate situations to get what he wanted. I didn't trust him, and I wouldn't until I was sure he'd learned his lesson. And then, one evening, Kate received a text from him. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when I noticed Kate's phone buzz on the coffee table next to me. Her face paled when she glanced at it, and the pit in my stomach deepened. I didn't need to see the message to know who it was from. She hesitated for a moment, then picked up her phone, glancing at it quickly before putting it back down. I looked up from my screen, sensing the shift in the room. Who was that? Kate took a deep breath, her fingers tapping nervously against her phone. It was Jordan. I felt a sharp pang of anger rise up in my chest, but I tried to keep my voice steady. What did he say? Kate bit her lip, glancing at me for a moment before reading the message aloud. Hey, Kate. I just wanted to make sure everything's cool between us. I don't want things to be weird, but I think about our conversation the other night, and I want you to know that I respect you. Hope we can move past it. There it was. The classic Jordan move. The attempt to smooth things over, to make it seem like everything was just fine. Like the boundaries he crossed hadn't meant anything. I could hear the manipulation in his words, and it didn't sit right with me. I couldn't just let him get away with it. Not now, not after everything. Kate looked at me, her eyes searching my face, unsure of how I was going to react. I don't know if I should respond. I don't want to stir up anything more. I could feel my blood boiling, but I forced myself to stay calm. Respond? No. You don't owe him an explanation. He doesn't get to just apologize and think everything's fine. He crossed a line, Kate. And I'm not going to let him worm his way back in just because he's feeling guilty now. She looked torn, unsure of what to do. I don't want things to be awkward with him, Mark. He's still a part of the group, and I don't want to cause drama. I understood where she was coming from, but I wasn't going to let that stop me from doing what I needed to do. This isn't about drama. It's about respect. He disrespected us both, and you don't owe him anything. If he wants to make things right, he needs to understand that it's not just going to be swept under the rug. I could tell Kate was conflicted, and I couldn't blame her. She didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but Jordan's actions had gone too far. He had made a choice when he kissed her, and he needed to be held accountable for that. I wasn't going to let him back into her life, not after everything that had happened. Kate, you can't keep appeasing him just because you feel guilty, I said, my voice softer now. You've done nothing wrong. He's the one who needs to face the consequences of his actions. Not you. Not us. Kate nodded, her eyes filled with uncertainty. You're right. I don't know how to handle this. I don't want to make things worse. I took her hand in mine, giving it a reassuring squeeze. We'll handle it together. You don't have to do this alone. I've got your back, no matter what. She exhaled slowly, then reached for her phone again. Her fingers hovered over the screen for a moment before she began typing. I couldn't make out the words, but I could see her focus. She was trying to craft the perfect response. After a moment, she hit send. I told him that I appreciated his message, but I needed time and space. That it wasn't just going to go away overnight, she said, her voice a little more confident now. I smiled at her, proud of how she handled it. That's perfect. You set the boundary. Now let's just leave it. For the next few days, we both tried to move on. I stayed close to Kate, making sure she knew that I was there for her, that I wouldn't let her feel pressured by anyone, including Jordan. But as the days passed, I could feel that uneasy tension creeping back in. I wasn't sure if it was just me being paranoid or if Jordan was still up to something, but I wasn't about to ignore my gut instinct. And then came the phone call. I was out running errands when Kate called me, her voice shaking when she picked up. "Mark, he's here. Jordan is outside." My stomach dropped. I could feel the adrenaline surge through my veins. "What do you mean, he's outside?" "I don't know what he wants," she said, her voice trembling. "But he's here, knocking on the door. He won't leave." My heart raced. I wasn't going to let this go any further. I didn't care if it was in the middle of the day, in front of the neighbors, or whatever excuse he was trying to make. He had crossed the line once already, and I wasn't about to let him do it again. "I'm on my way home, Kate. Don't open the door, okay? Lock it and wait for me." I hung up the phone and rushed to my car, my mind racing. I could feel the anger boiling up again, but this time, it was mixed with a sense of clarity. This wasn't just about me standing up for myself anymore, it was about protecting what mattered. Kate was mine to protect, and I wasn't going to let anyone threaten that, not even Jordan. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Jordan standing in front of our house, his hands in his pockets, a smug look on his face. I didn't hesitate. I marched up to him, my voice low but full of fury. "You need to leave, Jordan," I said, the words sharp. "You've crossed every line there is, and I won't let you back in." Jordan raised his hands in mock surrender, his expression a mixture of frustration and amusement. "Come on, man. I just want to talk. I don't want any bad blood between us." But I wasn't buying it. "No more talking. You've had your chance, and you've blown it. Now get off my property and stay the hell away from my girlfriend." I didn't care about his excuses anymore. He could say all he wanted about wanting to make amends, but his actions had already spoken louder than any apology. "I don't want to see you again, Jordan," I said, my voice steady but final. "And neither does Kate. Stay out of our lives." For a moment, he just stood there, staring at me, and I could see the realization in his eyes, that I wasn't messing around, that this wasn't a fight he could win. With a final, frustrated sigh, he turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped. I stood there for a long moment, my body still tense, until I saw Kate standing behind the door, watching us. She didn't say anything, but the look in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. She was grateful. I had protected her. And we could finally move on. After the scene with Jordan, things started to settle, but I knew that we weren't out of the woods just yet. Kate and I still had a lot to work through, and I had to prove, day after day, that I was the one she could count on. I had put myself in a position where I needed to be more than just a protector, I needed to be a partner in the truest sense of the word. It wasn't easy. The shadows of Jordan's actions still loomed over us, and every now and then, I could see Kate's doubts creeping in. She would look at me, her eyes wide with a mix of appreciation and guilt. As if she felt responsible for what had happened. But that wasn't on her. It was on Jordan, on his choices, his manipulation, his disrespect. I refused to let her carry any of that weight. A week passed since I'd kicked Jordan off our property, and although I'd hoped that would be the last of him, part of me was bracing for the worst. I wasn't under any illusion that he would simply vanish. He was a persistent guy, and I knew that in his mind, this wasn't over. But it wasn't just about Jordan anymore. It was about us, about Kate and me, and the road we had ahead. One afternoon, while we were sitting together on the couch, Kate turned to me, her face serious. "Mark, I need to talk to you about something." Her voice was soft, but there was an underlying weight to it. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up as she took a deep breath. I leaned in, giving her my full attention. "What's on your mind?" She fiddled with her fingers for a moment, then met my gaze. "I've been thinking about everything that happened with Jordan. And I don't know, maybe I haven't been completely honest with myself. I'm still shaken by it all. I don't want to bring it up again, but I think it's something we need to work through." I could see the vulnerability in her eyes. She wasn't just talking about Jordan anymore. She was talking about us, about the cracks that had formed between us, about how we were trying to put the pieces back together. And I knew in that moment that it wasn't going to be enough for me to just shut Jordan out. I needed to make sure that Kate felt secure, that she knew I had her, that I wouldn't let her down. "I get it, Kate," I said gently, my hand finding hers. "I've been thinking about this too. I know that what happened wasn't just about Jordan. It's about trust, and us, and how we deal with things when they get hard. But I want you to know that no matter what, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. And I'm going to prove it to you, every single day." She nodded slowly, her eyes softening. I don't want this to define us, Mark. I don't want to feel like I have to always look over my shoulder, like we're living in fear because of what happened." I could feel her pain, her need to move past the insecurity and doubt that Jordan had planted in her mind. And it struck me that we were both dealing with the fallout, not just from his actions, but from our own reactions to it. It wasn't just about shutting Jordan out, it was about shutting out the fear, the jealousy, the uncertainty that had crept into our relationship. It was about letting go of all that and focusing on what we had. "We're not going to live like that," I said, my voice firm with conviction. "What happened with Jordan doesn't define us. We define us. And I'm not going to let anything or anyone break what we have. Not now, not ever." Kate smiled, the tension in her shoulders easing as I spoke. She took a deep breath, as if letting go of a weight she'd been carrying, and for the first time in a while, I saw a real sense of peace in her eyes. "I believe you," she whispered. "I really do." And in that moment, I knew that we could make it through anything together. Jordan had tried to shake us, but all he'd done was strengthen our bond. It wasn't about winning or losing, it was about showing up for each other when it counted. A few more weeks passed without incident. Jordan's name wasn't mentioned once in our house, and while I knew there would always be a part of us that was scarred by what he had done, I felt a shift in our relationship. It wasn't just about repairing the damage, it was about building something stronger, something unshakable. Kate and I were learning to communicate better, to be more honest, to lean on each other in ways we hadn't before. Then one evening, Kate surprised me. We were at a small family gathering, just a few friends, a relaxed atmosphere, the kind of evening I had come to cherish since things had settled down. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the backyard. I was sitting with my arm around Kate when she turned to me, her expression full of quiet determination. "Mark, I've been thinking," she began, her voice steady. "I'm ready to make a statement too." I raised an eyebrow, confused. "What do you mean?" Kate took a deep breath and looked at the friends who were gathered around the fire pit. "I'm ready to let go of the past, to stop worrying about what happened. I don't want to feel like I have to hide my love for you or second-guess my place in your life. We've been through so much, and I want to take the next step with you, without holding back anymore." It hit me then, Kate wasn't just talking about moving forward from Jordan. She was talking about us, about putting her trust in me completely and letting go of the fear and uncertainty. And in that moment, I knew we were stronger than ever before. I reached over and took her hand, smiling at her. "I love you, Kate. I'm so proud of us. And whatever comes next, we face it together. Always." And with that, I knew our journey wasn't just about surviving what had happened. It was about thriving in spite of it. Our love had been tested, but it had emerged stronger than I ever could have imagined. Jordan? He was a chapter we had closed. And I wasn't about to let him, or anyone, interrupt our story ever again.